With regard to Eindhoven's industrial history, one's immediate thoughts turned to Philips and DAF. However, after Napoleon, there was already a thriving textile industry, 90 years prior to the birth of Philips in Eindhoven. Several textile companies had already settled along the city rivers Dommel and Gender, and later the Eindhoven Canal, using the water to wash and rinse their textiles. At its peak in 1913, these companies employed 1,200 workers in the textile industry of Eindhoven. The first cigar factories came into existence around 1850, and within 20 years employed 1,000 workers. A factory producing matches soon followed, and with 1,200 men became the largest employer in Eindhoven by 1891. That same year, Philips in Eindhoven opened its doors. A traditional home-based industry existed for centuries in Eindhoven and the surrounding areas. Spinning and weaving played a vital role in providing extra income for families who could not earn enough from agriculture due to the poor, sandy soils. Around 1800, textile entrepreneurs from the western Dutch towns brought work to the Brabant countryside. They were attracted by the wages, which were 40% lower in Brabant. Towns like Tilburg, Eindhoven and Helmond benefited from these new entrepreneurs. During this early period, woven fabrics made by home workers were finished in the small-scale factories. In 1812, Johannes Smits, a cotton miller, bought the Stratum's watermill, approximately located where the Van Abbe Museum now stands. There he built a new factory where cotton, wool and woven fabrics were produced with 15 machines driven by the water of the river Dommel. The factory employed nearly 1,000 people and by 1820 operated the first steam engine in Brabant. These are the big names in the textile world of Eindhoven. After weaving, the fabrics were washed and rinsed and dried. The fabrics were then bleached in the sun on large fields. Post-World War II saw the decline of the textile industry. Decolonisation meant reduced sales to the Third World. Then came the competition of low-wage countries who produced cheap textiles. Many of the factories have closed since 1970. In 1820, there were 20 hat factories in Eindhoven with a total of 175 employees. Of the 31,000 mostly felt hats which were produced in Brabant, approximately 70% originated from Eindhoven. The company Sporenberg specialized in making silk top hats. During the 19th century, hat factories began to disappear due to the rise of competition from Belgium and France, but mainly because the wearing of caps increased significantly. The company Sporenberg managed to keep its doors open until 1973. At his presidential inauguration, John F. Kennedy wore a silk top hat produced by Sporenberg. Since the 17th century, Eindhoven fulfilled a role in the supply, handling and processing of tobacco and snuff. The imported tobacco was sorted and dried. One portion of the tobacco was stripped and delivered as filler to cigar factories within the Netherlands. The wrapper, imported from the Dutch East Indies, was very popular for the more expensive brands. The Eindhoven tobacco soon became popular. The favourable labour market led new entrepreneurs to begin the production of cigars. Some entrepreneurs worked with home workers, while others brought the home workers together on one work floor to limit cost and time loss with the distribution of tobacco. Also, the quality of the cigar was increased. Cigar production soon became the second pillar of Eindhoven's industry. Between 1840 and 1950, some 170 cigar factories in Eindhoven came into existence, the majority employing 20 to 50 workers. Some medium-sized companies with 60 to 170 employees, and 4 large companies with 260 to 1,400 employees. Mignot and de Bloch was by far the largest company, and the first to employ females. In 1888, there were 500 women, more than a quarter of the total plant capacity. In 1883, there were 15 million cigars produced. About 120,000 kilos of tobacco was brought down to the city by boat and train. The factory of Henry van Abbe on Tongal Russestraat, with the brand Karel I, played an important role. The factory of Kessels and von Hussen, who produced the brand Abonné, was located on present-day Mathildelaan. Next to it there was the cigar factory von Gardingen, which was later converted into the Ventosa Flat, Eindhoven's first apartment building. By 1870 there were approximately 1,000 people in the tobacco processing industry. In 1913 there were 2,700. During and after World War II, liberators brought the cigarette into fashion, and cigars became less popular. Mignot and de Bloch therefore began producing cigarettes in addition to cigars. From 1960, the tobacco industry gradually began vanishing from the area. Investment in new production machinery and buildings were no longer viable for smaller family-run factories. Some entrepreneurs suspended activity, while others sold their companies to major English and American tobacco firms. They set up factories in Valkenswaard, Duizel and Eersel. Mignot and de Bloch was acquired by Philip Morris, the American company, in 1980, with its Eindhoven factory being merged with the one in Bergen op Zoom. In 1870, the match factory Mennen and Konen was established. The Canadian poplar was in abundance in the stream valleys of the Dommel, Tongelreep and Gender, and the wood was traditionally used for making wooden shoes and matches. Later, a second plant on the Luciferstraat was established. In 1884, the company bought the match factory of Vissers, Langmar and Co. in the Raiffeisenstraat. In 1891, the match factory, employing 1,200 men, became the largest employer of Eindhoven. In 1907, the three locations were merged together to form a new factory on the Lijnbeekstraat. The logs were peeled to long strips the thickness of a match. It was then chopped into match sticks. The head was made by dipping the sticks in a bath of chlorate of potassium. The matchboxes were also made in the factory. In 1920, the company became part of Swedish Match. By 1968, the company was transformed into an ultra-modern factory on the industrial area De Herk. About 10 years later, operations were terminated. Safety has always been a major concern. In the 110 years history of the match industry in Eindhoven, there had never been a major fire or explosion. In 1891, Gerard Philips began a light bulb factory. His father initially wanted to purchase a building in Breda, but eventually chose a vacant textile factory in Eindhoven along the town moat, the current Emma-single. Here we see enacted scenes of the manufacturing process. Young girls were particularly occupied with making of the filament. At that time, a carbon filament made of cotton was dissolved and charred in an oven. They placed the filament in glass balloons that came from Germany and melted the lamp closed. Then the air was pumped out of the lamp to create a vacuum. The first years were difficult. It took 2 years to improve the manufacturing process and took even longer to reach a comprehensive and cost-effective production method. In 1895, Gerard's brother Anton joined, participating in the sale of lamps. He focused on foreign countries, because Dutch cities had virtually no electricity. The bulb was a particular success in factories and shipping. The excess capacity of steam engines was used to generate electricity. Within his first year, Anton sold 200,000 light bulbs. 3 years later, this became 1 million. In the First World War, trade fell silent with Germany. Philips was now forced to make the glass balloons themselves. In quick succession, glass blowers from across the country were attracted by the new glassworks at the Glaaslaan. Very young boys cut the balloons off of the blowpipes. Here you see transport of the glass balloons from the glass factory to the lamp factory. Until the end of the 30s, almost everything was produced by hand. Only then the first glass balloon production machines were developed. And the first semi-automated lamp assembly lines were introduced. Soon came the need for more fundamental knowledge. The physics laboratory was founded on the Kastanjelaan in 1914 and was a huge contributor to product development and the improvement of production processes. Production of radio tubes began in 1923. 4 years later, the introduction of the first Philips radio followed, with particular attention paid to the actual design. Also, the first X-ray machines appeared on the market. The company grew so rapidly that it created a large housing shortage. Philips decided in 1910 to create a new residential area with 900 homes, which Philips called Philipsdorp. For the growth of the radio industry, they went to Drenthe in 1931 and recruited 600 families, of which had to have at least 3 daughters older than 14. They were housed in Drentsdorp in Strijp, but this was not enough housing. Until well into the 1970s, buses, trains and even trucks transported the employees daily from southeast Brabant and Belgium. In 1928, the brothers van Doorne started a small engineering workshop on the Tongelrussestraat. 2 years later, a construction site was established on the Bergplein to produce trailers. Huub van Doorne was a real inventor. He designed an automatic trailer coupling with connections for the lights and brakes. In 1936, the factory also focused on the conversion of ordinary trucks to all-terrain vehicles with 4 powered rear wheels. The railway system containers, a predecessor of the current container, were very successful. In 1952, a large contract for military vehicles made building a new factory complex necessary on the Geldropseweg. In 1954 it employed 1,850 workers, including many of the unemployed cigar makers who had been hit by mechanisation. Both military vehicles and trucks were built. In 1955, the 10,000th truck was delivered. What traces are there still to be found from the early industrial period in Eindhoven between 1800 and 1950? The wall of the textile factory of Vondenbriel and Vester on the Dommelstraat, and the washhouse of the plant along the Dommel. The outer wall of the former cigar factory Karel I on the Tongelroosterstraat, showing the tile picture with the name of the company Van Abbe. The building of the match factory of Mennen and Koenen from 1880 on the Raiffeisenstraat, behind the former garage of Van de Meulen Ansems on Westdijk. A large number of villas built by the manufacturers, especially in the parkland. The company Leo Skellens on the Westdijk, where traditional woven velour upholstery is produced. This company was the only remaining textile mill within the city of Eindhoven, but moved recently to Helmond. At the printers, Vrijdag, in Eindhoven, they have continuously made cigar bands since 1905. The factory on the Emma single, where Philips began in 1891, is now a museum. Philips no longer manufactures within the city of Eindhoven. With the exception of the headquarters of the lighting division, Philips buildings are now used for other purposes, or will be in the future. The headquarters of Philips Medical Systems is in the city of Best, a company where X-ray and scanning systems are developed and produced. ASML in Veldhoven, formerly a division of Philips, is a leader in the field of wafer steppers. These are devices that produce chips, for example for use in mobile phones and laptops. The company FEI on the industrial area 8 has taken over previous Philips activities in the field of electron microscopes. Philips also sold the production of silicone chips. This company is now operating under the name NXP and is based at the high-tech campus. After bankruptcy in 1993, DAF was taken over by the American truck factory PACCAR and made a successful restart after the acquisition. For years, South-East Brabant has been one of the leading industrial regions of the Netherlands. In the city of Eindhoven, industrialization began after 1800 and has led Eindhoven to grow into the fifth largest city of the Netherlands.